all these years. I'm sure he's afraid and really just doesn't want to give up his position of power.
And just to add that, and something I think will play into a little bit what we're talking about tonight is you're probably expecting some bad blood between people in David's camp and then someone like Abner, right? Someone who may have been pursuing David, and everyone with David, right? Uh, you may have been about to get into this, but what do we have with the specific conflict we talked about last time? You remember what kind of outcome was from the specific conflict we talked about last time? You have Joab's men and Abner's men. Yeah, at a tie. Everyone was a loser in that one, right? Yeah.
And then, what's his name? Ouch. No.
Asahel.
Asahel.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Got killed.
That's right. And who was he?
He was a brother to
Joab. That's right. So that's going to be important tonight. And then generally speaking, who won the battle? David's men, right? So David's army won that battle. So all that's going to kind of play a part into what we're talking about tonight. I mean, leads into that really well. Anything? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. Anything else before we get started into the text tonight? So we'll pick up in chapter 3, and I know we've already went over it, but we'll reiterate the first verse there. It says, "Now there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David, but David grew stronger and stronger, and the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. Sons were born to David at Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon by Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, his second Caleb by Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite, the third Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmiah, king of Geshur, the fourth Adonijah, the son of Haggith, the fifth Shephatiah, the son of Abitiel, the sixth Ithream by David's wife Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron." And even though I butchered some of those names, Ammon is some of these names are gonna come up again, and Absalom are going to be the two big names that we need to remember. And we need to remember that his grandfather is going to be the king of Geshur, and that's going to play out in our story later on. But it says that these were born to David while he was in Hebron. And so in our story tonight, he's going to make a transition from Hebron to being the king of Israel. And it's later in our story. But again, they're made mention here because they're going to be key players. Some of them are going to play into our story later. And I think that's why they're mentioned here. But again, in the first verse, it says that David is growing stronger and stronger, and it says that Saul's house is growing weaker and weaker. And it also mentions that there was a long war between the two. And I think that's interesting that Saul is gone and out of the picture, and it should have been an easy transition. But because of wicked men, it's not easy. And we know that this is the Lord's will, and that should be helpful to us in our lives when we think, I know this is God's will. Why is it not easy? Why is it not working out smoothly for me? It didn't for David. And David knew exactly what was promised to him in his life. And so we shouldn't expect any different in our difficulties in our own lives when we're trying to serve God. Do you have anything you want to add through the first 5 verses, or anyone else? Questions or comments? If you want to pick up in verse 6.
All right, we'll read 6 through 11. "While there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner was making himself strong in the house of Saul. Now Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, 'Why have you gone into my father's concubine?' Then Abner was very angry over the words of Ishbosheth and said, 'Am I a dog's head of Judah? To this day I keep showing steadfast love to the house of Saul your father, to his brothers and to his friends, and have not given you over into the hand of David. Yet you charge me today with a fault concerning a woman. God do so to Abner, and more also, if I do not accomplish for David what the Lord has sworn to him, to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah from Dan to Beersheba. And Ishbosheth could not answer Abner another word because he feared him. All right, so this is an interesting little altercation between the two. I think some things here are left a little ambiguous, all right? So what do we see Abner doing in general at this point? What does it say he does? Makes himself strong, right? So what does that mean to make himself strong?
Kind of irreplaceable or
Yeah. So he's kind of, I mean, he's not elevating Ishbosheth, right? Like he's elevating his own status. He's elevating his own position of power here, right? That's what he's doing. So when he's making himself strong, he's establishing himself. Now, is Ishbosheth catching on to this? Yes. Now, the accusation Ishbosheth makes is one where it's like, I can't tell if he's just saying, he just suspects something and he's just making an accusation, right? And it's not a true accusation. Abner rejects it. Or if he had some reason to really think this, I don't know much about that. We're not given a whole lot of that. But what we do know is that he accuses Abner of taking his father's, Saul's, concubine, right? Now, why would that be something that would be a big deal to Ishbosheth?
that was the king's, but the king kind of inherited his father's concubines and things when he took position.
That's right. And so if Abner's doing that, what is Abner saying about who he thinks he is? That's right. He thinks he's in charge, right? So that would be the reason I think he's making this accusation. And if he heard something along those lines, even if it wasn't true, it would be a big deal to him, right? So he brings it forward to Abner. Does Abner take kindly to this? No, of course not. In fact, Abner's looking at us like, look, I try to be loyal to the house of Saul, which is kind of funny considering it says he's making himself strong in Saul's house, like himself strong. But he does say, have I given you over to David's hand? No, I haven't, right? And you're going to make these accusations against me, right? So how dare you, basically? What does he say he's going to do starting now?
Back up to David, king like he's supposed to be.
Yes. Now that's interesting, right? So he said he's going to make him king like he's supposed to be, right? You notice how here he said, God do so to Abner and more also if I do not accomplish for David what the Lord has sworn to him. Now that's an interesting statement to me because it's one thing to say like, David is a good man and he should be king because I've judged it so, right? But he's not saying that. He's saying David should be king because God has sworn that to him. Now the reason this is interesting is because it brings up the question of why has Abner been doing what Abner's been doing, right? Abner's the one that made sure Ishbosheth was king, maybe for his own reasons, but he knows what God has sworn to David. And yet he does this, right? Now, he's been insulted enough apparently to change his mind, and he says he's going to help David out. Now, maybe I'll make more comments on this later, but I'm going to make a brief comment on it now at least. So, is it God's will that Judah and Israel both go to David?
Yes.
Yes. Does everything that's God's will always happen in a righteous way? Not always, right? Sometimes God uses wicked nations or wicked people who do wicked things to accomplish his will, and the end result is what God was wanting. That may be part of what's happening here with Abner, right? I don't know if Abner's a very good guy, but he's going to be used in a role in order to accomplish what God wants to accomplish for David. And then we see that Ishbosheth kind of backs down here, right? So he's afraid of Abner. He backs down. What do you say?
Yeah, just the fact that he knows that David is supposed to be king, and he admits that here. I mean, that kind of shows us his character. And like Austin said, I don't know whether or not this accusation is true, but apparently it offends him, whether it's true or not, enough that he's going to change his allegiance to David. He doesn't care enough about his position because of this instance that he's going to go and serve David.
Yeah.
Anything else? Did you make it through down to 12?
Yes.
Then Abner sent messengers on his behalf to David, saying, Whose is the land? Saying also, Make your covenant with me, and indeed my hand shall be with you, to bring all Israel to you. And David said, Good, I will make a covenant with you, but one thing I require of you, you shall not see my face unless you bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to see my face. So David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, Give me my wife, Michal, whom I betrothed to myself for 100 foreskins of the Philistines. And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband, from Paltiel, the son of Laish. Then her husband went along with her to Bahurim, weeping behind her. So Abner said to him, Go, return. And he returned. Now Abner had communicated with the elders of Israel in times past. Now Abner had communicated with the elders of Israel, saying, In times past you were seeking for David to be king over you. Now then do it. For the Lord has spoken of David, saying, By the hand of my servant David, I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of all their enemies. And Abner also spoke in the hearing of Benjamin. Then Abner also went to speak in the hearing of David in Hebron, all that seemed good to Israel by the whole house of Benjamin. So Abner and 20 men with him came to David at Hebron, and David made a feast for Abner and the men that were with him. Then Abner said to David, I will arise and go and gather all Israel to my lord the king, that they may make a covenant with you, and that you may reign over all that your heart desires. So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. So here, Abner sends word to David and he says, Whose is the land? He asked him a couple questions there. Whose is the land, and will you make a covenant with me? And, who did the land belong to according to God's promises? It was belonged to David. He was the rightful king. And I think he's appealing to that here. And he says, Make a covenant with me. And what's David's response? Is he happy, or is he saying, No, I can't trust you? He's glad. He wants peace. David has had nothing but turmoil in his life for a long time now. And I think when someone is coming to him, David's going to try his best to make peace if he can. But
especially with his own people,
right, with his own people. Right. And that's where most of his conflict has been. He has dealt with the Philistines and with the Amalekites and other nations, but for the most part, it's been his people that he's been dealing with or been running from, I guess you could say. So what's David's proposal? He wants to get his stolen wife back. And this is a sad situation, that Saul had given her away to another man that he didn't have a right to do. It was right. Michal was rightfully David's wife. And we see some of the consequences here, that the man is following her and weeping, and he wants her back. And Abner says, Go. You can't be here. Go away. Return back to where you came from. Go. And he respects Abner enough that he does so. But again, it's still a sad situation. But David has every right. She was promised to him. He killed 200 Philistines, which it only mentions 100 here. But he went above and beyond what Saul asked for her hand in marriage. And then Saul kind of went back on that. And we don't have all the details in that. But while David was on the run, he gives her away to someone else. So they agree to do this. And Abner goes to the elders and he says, you were going to make David king, do it now. He said, now's the time to do it. And it seems like everybody is very willing to cooperate here, and everything's going to work out well. And it says that Abner and 20 of his men goes to see David, and it says that David sends him away in peace. So they've come to this agreement. Abner's going to bring all the people to David. They're going to make him king. He's going to be king over the whole nation. Everything looks very good right now. But with David's life, it seems like we have a glimmer of hope, and then something comes along to shatter it. And we'll see that as we continue on. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, maybe a couple things I'd say. So one is, I think it's interesting that Abner starts getting to work pretty much right away, it seems. He says, I'm going to make sure David gets the kingdom, and he does, right? Also, I think it's interesting that you look at how it describes who he talks to. So he talks to Israel, and then who's it say he talks to separately? Benjamin. Why would he have to? I mean, like, why are they just not included? Yeah, Saul's from the house of like these are Saul's people, right? If anybody was going to be loyal to Saul and his house and his lineage, it'd be Benjamin. So he goes, and I think maybe it's pointing out he makes a special effort here, right, to try to convince them. It seems like he's successful, right? Also, I'll point out, I like his argument, right? I mean, what's his argument here for David being king?
Because he's supposed to deliver the people from the Philistines from hand with their enemies.
That's right. So God has made promises that David should be king and that he's going to fulfill certain things for you, right? He's going to defeat the Philistines. He's going to lead you, that kind of thing. That's a good argument, right? I mean, that's a good, strong argument there. Maybe we're surprised in some ways that, again, Abner's making this argument, considering his, defiance of David in the past.
His background.
But that's the argument he's making now. And it's a good argument, even if maybe he doesn't, he's not necessarily a great man, right? It's a good argument. So.
You not think that this fallout that Abner has with you not think it's convenient? I mean, he of all people would see the tide, how it was turned. How David was just gaining momentum. He could read the tea leaves, per se. He knew which way it was going. So I think he uses this situation with Ishbosheth to go David. I think he would want to do that and just looking for an opportunity to do that.
Yeah. I think
he's going to present himself as a servant. Now he's wanting to do the Lord's will and all that. Come on.
Yeah.
That's not who Abner is.
Yeah.
I wonder the situation.
He's trying to position himself on a winning side.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And do so in such a way that David would be favorable toward him. It'd be different if they went to battle and then he surrendered, but he comes to him with this offer: I will bring all the people to you. And so that also should help in his favor David's favor toward him.
And I wonder if the situation comes up because you're talking about how the tide is turning, right? So it's like when things are not going well, I mean, you can see why Ishbosheth would be paranoid, right? And he'd be like, "Well, you're trying to backstab me," which it seems Abner was, right? I mean, but you can see why you have these certain things going on, and it would be very convenient for Abner to be like, "You know what? I'm going to get out of here." And it's like, yeah, you've offended me. That's right. So, in some ways it's convenient, right? But it, I think, comes from that tide turning. The whole situation does.
Anything else? If you want to pick up in 22.
Sure. All right. So we'll read 22 through 30. Just then the servants of David arrived with Joab from a raid, bringing much spoil with them. But Abner was not with David at Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he had gone in peace. When Joab and the army that was with him came, it was told Joab, Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and he has let him go, and he has gone in peace. Then Joab went to the king and said, What have you done? Behold, Abner came to you. Why is it you have sent him away so that he is gone? You know that Abner the son of Ner came to deceive you, and to know your going out and your coming in, and to know all that you're doing. When Joab came out from David's presence, he sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the cistern of Sirah. But David did not know about it. And when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside into the midst of the gate to speak with him privately, and there he struck him in the stomach so that he died, for the blood of Asahel, his brother. Afterward, when David heard of it, he said, I and my kingdom are forever guiltless before the Lord for the blood of Abner, the son of Ner. May it fall upon the head of Joab and upon all his father's house. And may the house of Joab never be without one who has a discharge, or who is leprous, or who holds a spindle, or who falls by the sword, or who lacks bread. So Joab and Abishai, his brother, killed Abner because he had put their brother Asahel to death in the battle at Gibeon. All right, so I didn't mention this, but when you read the last section, so before when we just read together, things seem kind of hopeful for David, right? I mean, and you said that. It's like things seem to be going pretty good. But every time things seem to be going pretty good, it seems there's some type of setback, right? So things seem to be going great. Abner's on their side now. Sunshine and rainbows. And then who comes back?
Joab.
Joab does. Now, of course, Joab hears Abner has come and he is gone, and he wasn't killed or even tried to, they didn't try to kill him, and he's happy about that, right?
No.
No, right? He's not happy about that. He's like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, why did you let him go? Now, what is the reason that Joab gives for you shouldn't have let him go?
It's like spies.
Yeah, he's a spy, right? He's trying to figure out what you're doing. Now, I guess it's possible that Joab thought that could have been what was going on. I think it's also just as likely that Joab does not think that's what's going on, and Joab just wants Abner dead, right? Maybe it's a combination of both, right? I think he wants Abner dead no matter what, whether he believes this or not. But he says, he's a spy. So what does Joab do? Does he defer to David here? Does he say, okay, David, you think this is what's right, so we'll go with that? Does he do that?
No.
No. In fact, you'll see Joab, this is kind of who Joab is, right? Joab is, I think, in a lot of ways, very loyal to David, but I think he's also very headstrong. And if he believes he has a better idea than David does, and if he believes it's for David's benefit and for his own benefit also, that's what Joab's going to do. So what does Joab do? Yeah. So Abner, you come back, and he's acting like he's David, right? So he said, come back. He meets Abner, and by the way, David doesn't know this, right? He meets Abner, and what happens?
He
Kills him, right? So he and Abishai both. It mentions that later on. At first, it just says Joab, right? Joab strikes him, and then later on, it says Joab and Abishai. So I'm not sure exactly how that worked, but they're both involved in this somehow. Kills him, and you look at this and it's like, well, that's not great, right? Like, who knows how that's going to turn out for what Abner was trying to accomplish? I think that's a big question at this point, because Abner has already talked to all the land of Israel, right? And he's already kind of, I think, convinced them, hey, we should try to do this. And the last thing the people of Israel seem to know is that he's gone to see David, and now he's been murdered, right? Is that going to be a great look for David? No. All right, so let's keep that in mind, because that will come up later, okay? So this is not going to be a great look for David right now. But it's also not David's fault. And how does David react to this when he hears of it? Because he didn't know about this, right, until afterwards. How does he react to this?
basically put like a curse on him and his family.
Yeah. So he is not happy with this, right? He's not happy with this. And it would be one thing to be, and he will do this in a little bit, but it'd be one thing just to mourn, Abner and maybe the potential that Abner had to help him, right? That would be one thing. But he's also angry at Joab and what Joab has done. And like you said, he's put a curse on Joab's
family,
lineage,
yeah.
From then on out. So you have all that going on, and what's interesting, and maybe we'll talk more about this later on, but what's interesting about this too is that I don't know how much of Joab's status changes after this, right? Like, it seems like he's doing this pretty contrary to what David wants to happen. But David still keeps Joab around, right? Even though he curses him and his family, he still keeps him around.
Well, and even though he talks to him like he's greater than David, and maybe he did that while they were on the run, David would confide in people and, what should I do here? And maybe he's assuming that he can still take that role here, but coming to David and talking to him like he's a little brother or something here, like, what are you doing? What's going on? And not having that respect for the king, at least the way I read it, it doesn't seem like he's very respectful to David here in his position. But the fact that he come and does that, and then he's like, David's not going to be on board with this. So I'm going to go and I'm going to be secretive, and I'm going to make him think that David's calling him back, and I'm going to pull him aside like I'm going to talk to him. I'm just going to kill him. And as you mentioned, his brother was somehow helped in that fact. And but like you said, that just kind of points out the kind of man that Joab is, and we'll see more of that behavior going forward. But David, like Austin said, that has to look terrible for the rest of the people for the rest of Israel that's coming to David. Well, Abner said that he was going to make everything right, and we're all going to go to him, and that's the last we've heard. And now he's went to David, and now he's dead. And so, and it seems to be on David's behalf that he's done that. And I think that's why David mentions, my kingdom and I are guiltless in this. I didn't kill him. I didn't have him killed. It's not on me. And I think that's why David's going to react to this situation the way he does in the rest of the chapter. Anything else through 30? Anyone would like to add?
Do you think Abishai wished he'd have killed Abner and Saul back in 1 Samuel 26 when he snuck into the camp? And then also, too, hearing David tell Abner at the same time, you deserve to die because you didn't protect Saul.
Yeah.
So you think that him and Joab may be remembering this back from chapter 26?
Yeah.
I'm sure Abishai probably feels that way. That doesn't necessarily mean he's right in feeling that way, but I'm sure he does feel that way, right? I mean, he wanted to kill him to begin with, and then he does here. So.
Yeah, and he probably wouldn't, from what we see from David, he wouldn't be in this story had he had done that there. David would have had him killed for killing the Lord's anointed. But yeah, I think he is. I think he probably does regret not doing that back then.
Well, he heard David tell Abner, you deserve to die.
Right.
Because you didn't protect the Lord's anointed. So,
That's right.
You know, it kind of makes you wonder about David. David, you said Abner deserved to die back in 26. Now he's dead.
Right.
But like you said, it makes him look bad.
Right. Yeah, and I think if you remember how Asahel, I'm probably not saying that right, Asahel, how he died, Abner tried to put him off. You know, he talked to him several times, turn aside. You know, you don't want to do this. It's not going to turn out well for you. And it was really either Abner or Asahel here. So like it was in war. And so it's a different situation than this. And again, Abner has no idea what's going on when they pull him aside. He's completely blindsided and deceived in this. It's not like they met him at the gate and said, draw your sword, you killed my brother. It's nothing of that sort. And not that would have been right either. But he's very deceptive in this because he knows that if David has a chance to step in, he's going to step in, and I'm not going to get what I want in that. And I think that's why he goes about it the way he does. And then some of the things he does later, that's why he does the things that he does, is because he knows if David knows about what he's doing, he's not going to be able to accomplish it. But we'll pick up here in 31. It says, Then David said to Joab and to all the people that were with him, Tear your clothes, gird yourselves with sackcloth, and mourn for Abner. And King David followed the coffin, so they buried Abner in Hebron. And the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. And the king sang a lament over Abner and said, Should Abner die as fools die? Your hands were not bound, your feet put into fetters. As a man falls before wicked men, so you fell. Then all the people wept over him again. And the people came to persuade David to eat food while it was still day. But David took an oath, saying, God do so to me, and more also, if I taste bread or anything else till the sun goes down. Now all the people took note of it, and it pleased them, since whatever the king did pleased all the people. For all the people and all Israel understood that day that it had not been the king's intent to kill Abner the son of Ner. Then the king said to his servants, Do you not know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel? And I am weak today, though anointed king, and these men, the sons of Zeruiah, are too harsh for me. The Lord shall repay the evildoer according to his wickedness. And so here, not only is David weeping, but he makes Joab, he said, you're going to weep. And kind of, it almost, since it mentions him first, like you're going to lead in this. And almost as a kind of humiliating Joab in a way. I know what you did, and you're going to show that you are sorrowful for this, even though David knows he's not. But you're going to mourn over Abner, and you're going to gird yourself with sackcloth. And David follows this coffin or this funeral procession here. And I know, I think Larson mentioned, as he was going over this before, that, normally presidents they pay people tons of money to make sure that their image is portrayed a certain way. But David doesn't care about that image, even though doing what he's doing, even though it's true and it's genuine. He's not trying to look powerful here. He's trying to let everyone know that this was not his fault, that he had nothing to do with this. And he's successful in that, and very wise in what he's doing. And even the words that he says about Abner, should he have died as a fool dies? His position, he was a general over Saul's army. And really, if you want to say, he was really the king over Israel. And Ishbosheth was just a puppet king. So, he should have had a glorious death and not this fool's death or a coward's death that Joab gave him. And it says that his hands were not bound, his feet were not put into fetters. He wasn't a prisoner of war that had been killed. He was deceived. And it says, as a man falls before wicked men, so you fell. And so he's saying Joab he's a wicked man in this action here. And it says that all the people wept over him again. And it also says that all the people took note of it, and this is talking about him fasting. And I think it's interesting. I feel like if you put Saul in the same situation up till the fast point, I think Saul would have declared, nobody eat until the sun went down. But David, he doesn't proclaim that here. He said, I'm not going to eat anything until the sun goes down. And I think in doing that, that shows wisdom, that he's not making other people participate in that. Yes, he made them gird up in sackcloth and mourn for Abner, but when it comes to this degree of mourning, he's not making the people do that he's doing that himself, and that pleased the people, and they could see his genuineness in that because he's doing this fasting here. But again, it mentions the sons of Zeruiah. They're too harsh for him, and it says that David's weak, even though he's been anointed king. This should be a high point in David's life. He's been anointed king over all Israel. But because of these brothers, he's not able to do that. He feels low today. He's not on a high point.
He's not been anointed yet, but this would lead to that.
Right.
And like Abner's campaign would lead to that.
Right. And I think that goes back to Asahel as well. It says they're too harsh. If he wasn't so prideful that he just kept going after Abner, then Joab wouldn't wanted to avenge him. And if Joab would listen to David and he wasn't too harsh, this wouldn't happen in the first place either. And so all of these sons are too harsh for David, and they bring him low. When really it seems like they were mighty men of valor and mighty men of war. They should have been something that David was proud of, but instead they're bringing him shame.
Well, we know they're warriors because they're part of David's family, right?
Right.
Nephews by his sister Zeruiah.
Mm.
So they're fierce. They come from a fierce family, just like David.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Abner was Saul's cousin, so that's all family.
Mm-hmm.
And then David, Joab, Abishai, his nephew.
Yeah.
I think one thing we see here is we've talked a lot, and I think this is true. We've talked a lot about the idea that there's a division already. We've seen a division here. It's been very clear, actually, because we have Judah and Israel, two different kings, right? I think this is a uniting moment, right? This is a moment where everybody's kind of on the same page, and they're all like, okay, David didn't mean to do this. This has affected him, and he wants what's best for the whole land, right? So this is one of those, I think, maybe in some ways rare moments that we get, at least rare for right now, that we get where they're all united on something. And so it came at the expense of Abner, but it's something that, we talked about not always good things happened to accomplish God's plan. I don't necessarily think this is a good thing, but it helps accomplish God's plan here. Yeah.
You have to think that David making this such a public spectacle. Of course, it's not taken away. It's not saying it wasn't genuine or anything, but Joab threatened uniting this kingdom together. Because brought up the division within this nation. I mean, they've been in civil war for years now, and right on the brink of bringing this nation together again, and then Joab pulls this stuff and puts everything in jeopardy. So, David has to try to patch this back together.
And I think he does it in a wise way, right?
Yeah.
It could have been David's like, you know what, this is a great opportunity. They don't have any leaders now, right? Or I guess they have Ishbosheth, but their strongest leader is gone now. Like, I'm just going to really take over my command. He could have tried that, but he doesn't, right?
And David even praises Abner by calling him, in verse 38, a prince and a great man
Yeah.
at all.
He does say that.
He does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he brings Abner honor, even though Abner tried to kill him,
Yeah.
chase him.
Just like he did with Saul, right? Yeah.
How long did it take for the last statement to come about? The last statement of the chapter. May the Lord repay the evildoer according to his evil. We kind of know because David's still ruling in Hebron, right?
Mhm.
He's going to rule 33 years in Jerusalem. And so what does he tell Solomon to do to Joab? Kill him.
Kill him,
So, kind of like you said, all things work in God's time, not as we see it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting to me that he doesn't have Joab killed in this. And it seems like Joab is worthy of death. And I think he'll mention that to Solomon later. And I don't fully understand why. I know that he values Joab.
I think he's going to need Joab to be able to conquer Philistines.
Yeah.
He knows he's going to need Joab for that effort.
Which is interesting because he actually doesn't need Joab, right? If he is the Lord, he doesn't need Joab. But I think he values him still. Yeah, that's what you're saying.
It's Saul. I don't know if that's what Solomon does. Good. I had an idea with it.
Oh, we probably need to
In
move on.
chapter 10, we'll see these two brothers out here fighting.
Yes.
All right. So we probably need to move on because we got 5 minutes and a chapter, which is a short chapter, but we have a chapter. So I'll be doing some summarizing here. So at the beginning of the chapter, Abner's now dead. Ishbosheth still alive. How does this affect Ishbosheth? Yeah. So he's lost courage, right? So he's kind of given up hope at this point, which I think makes sense, right? I mean, like, Abner seems to represent a lot of the power he had. I mean, Abner says he was protecting Ishbosheth, and I don't think he was necessarily wrong about that. Now Abner's gone, even though Abner was working against him. Now he's gone. It's like, well, what do I have now? Not much. We take a second to mention someone else, which I don't know exactly why it's mentioned. Mephibosheth is mentioned right here. But we take a second to mention Mephibosheth, and who is he?
Jonathan's son.
Jonathan's son. Yeah. Sorry. And what do we know about him?
He's lame in his feet.
Right. He's lame in his feet. And why did that happen? He was dropped whenever they heard about Saul and Jonathan being killed, right? In the panic, he was dropped. Now, that's kind of like, just hold on to that thought, right? That'll come up again later. I'm not exactly sure why it's right here, but just remember it for later, okay? So then we come back to Ishbosheth. So we come back to Ishbosheth, and we're introduced to a couple people here. So look at verse 5. Now the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, Rechab and Baanan, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but we're going to act like it, set out about the heat of the day, and they came to the house of Ishbosheth as he was taking his noonday rest. What are these two men going to do? They're going to kill him, right? And not only are they going to kill him, what are they going to do after they kill him? Decapitate him. That's exactly right. And then what do they do with that?
Bring it to David.
Take it to David. Okay? Now, what do you think their intention is in this?
Show their loyalty to him.
Show loyalty to David. Like, look, we've done you a favor. Does this seem familiar? Yeah. So what does this kind of seem like?
The Amalekite.
Yeah, the Amalekite, right, with Saul. So Amalekite with Saul. Now, to be fair to the Amalekite didn't actually kill Saul, right? So there's that thing. And he didn't behead Saul and bring his head, right? He just brought his jewelry or a spear too.
I think it was just his crown and his jewelry.
His crown, that was it. So his crown and then his bracelet. So he brings those things, which would be identifying markers. But here they actually just bring Ishbosheth's head. Seems, like a worse situation, right? Now, you would think with Saul, David was very angry because who was Saul in David's eyes?
The Lord's anointed.
The Lord's anointed. So it's like, how dare you kill the Lord's anointed? Here, is Ishbosheth the Lord's anointed? No, not the Lord's anointed, but does that seem to matter much to David as far as how he reacts? No, right? He still realizes this is not okay, right? This is not how this kind of thing is supposed to work. So what does he do? Yeah, has them killed, right? Has these two killed. Also, kind of gruesome, but cuts off their hands and feet and hangs them by a pool, and not great, right? So he's sending a message here, right? Like, this is not acceptable. Even though Ishbosheth's not the Lord's anointed, still part of Saul's house, and this is not what we're going to do to Saul's house, right? Let's see if there's anything else I want to say about that. Verse 11, again, David makes a couple of interesting statements here with Abner and now Ishbosheth. So in verse 11, he says, how much more when wicked men, talking about the two that have done this, which I think he's right there. He says, how much more when wicked men have killed a righteous man in his own house on his bed, right? He's describing Ishbosheth as a righteous man. I mean, I don't know what he means exactly by that, other than maybe he's saying like Ishbosheth is, I don't know, maybe blameless to some extent, but
maybe not guilty of this punishment.
Yeah, maybe not guilty of this punishment. That may be right. So I don't know exactly what that means there, but David, what we see continually with David is he seems to be very gracious to those who oppose him when they're part of the house of Israel, right? And when they're part of God's people. So with Saul, with Abner, with Ishbosheth, he seems to have an attitude. Now, not so much with like Philistines, right? Like if they oppose, God's people, not the same mercy, right? But we see this kind of pattern here, and it's interesting to note that.
Yeah. And I'll sum up the beginning of chapter 5 here. It said, really, all the tribes come to David and make peace with him, and they basically say that they're all one, and that when Saul was king, David was the one that really led them. He was with them coming in and going out, pretty much handling all their needs. And so they make him king over all Israel here. It mentions that he was 30 years old, and he'll reign for 40 years. And then so he was 30 years old. He reigned 40 years, 7.5 years in Hebron, and 33 years the whole nation of Israel. And so at 30 years old, he's 30 years old in this story. And I think that's something in my mind.
Well, he's probably 37 in this one.
Yes, right.
He was 30 when he became king over Judah, I think, right?
If I read that correctly, and I might not have.
I may be wrong.
But anyway, so in his 30s, and he's had all this happen in his life. And not that I want to cut him any slack that when he made some of the decisions he's made up till now, but I can sympathize with that because I'm not too far from his age and having all those big decisions that you have to make, and you have to make them now. You're not getting chances to think about, hey, what am I going to do? You just have to act. I mean, it's like watching football. When you're watching it, you're like, why did they do that? But when you're on the field and it's coming at you 100 miles an hour, you don't have time to react to those things as if you're watching it. And so there's mistakes being made there. And I think David has learned from some of those things, and that's why he's turning out to be the king that he is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Next time, we'll look at 2 Samuel 5. We'll start in verse 6, and we'll go through chapter 6, and we'll also look at Psalm 105. So make sure you read that beforehand. Go ahead.
We'll bring up, this story of having these two put to death. Later, David
Is a man of war or a man of war? That's good.
a lot of bloodshed,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was justified or not, there's been a lot of bloodshed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even though a lot of that, most of that was God's will, God still won't have his name tied to a man building his house with that much blood on his hands. Good point. I know.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.